Hello, everyone. I would like to talk to you today about the sci-fi movie called The Mysterians. Now, The Mysterians is a movie that came out in a much earlier time, before they had a lot of CGI effects and fancy digital renditions. Um, kind of the building blocks or the beginning of when people started sharing some stories regarding space travel and spacemen or aliens, the UFOs, and all of that. And we know that this is the type of subject we love to discuss in this channel. But I have to tell you that one of my favorites is this movie called The Mysterians. Not because, I mean, it's kind of campy and has that kind of old style that we grew to love, even like Star Trek or some of the older shows, Lost in Space, that even though they were kind of quirky, they had a storyline that kind of captured you, and you knew that it was a type of soft disclosure or a kind of lead in to tell us what is actually going on out there. Interactions that maybe the government didn't disclose, or some kind of discussions and agreements that our world has made at some period of time throughout history with visitors from space. So some people say, well, I don't believe in that. Well, you're in the wrong place, because that's where we're going today. And we're going to talk about this group called the Mysterians. So I'm going to get right into it and start showing you give you a background of it and what I have discovered. So here it is. This is the movie itself. And we'll first go to the Wikipedia page. It's a 1957 Japanese epic science fiction film directed by Ishiro Honda with special effects from, I can't say the name, Subarara. I can't say the name all right, so I won't even try it. Anyhow, it was inspired by some of the science fiction films. I believe it's also related to movies like Godzilla. Let me see. I think I read something about it. So here's the plot. There's an astrophysicist, Ryoshi Shiriashi, his fiancée Hiroko Awamoto, and his sister Etsuko and friend Joji attend a Bon festival in a village in the foot of Mount Fuji. During the festival, Shirashi rushes out to investigate a sudden forest fire that has flared up nearby and disappears during the confusion. The next day, they meet with this head astronomer. Adachi hands him an incomplete report written by Shirashi regarding a newly discovered asteroid he believed was once a planet between Mars and Jupiter, dubbed Mysteroid. However, Adachi repudiates his radical theory. Meanwhile, the village in which the festival was held is completely wiped out by a massive earthquake. While investigating the area, Atsumi and the group of police officers stumble upon a giant robot, Mogera, which bursts from the side of a hill. It emits rays, and that destroys most of the investigation team. So, immediately you see that this huge robot shows up, which also reminded me of the Transformers, like an earlier idea of these enormous robots showing up and creating havoc, or the day that Earth stood still is another idea that I'd have to look and see and compare the dates. In 1951, so it was right around the same time, maybe it was a few years earlier. But anyhow, they get into this scenario where the robot shows up, and then the scientists are called in by the Mysterians. These are the group of individuals that escape some type of calamity that happens on their planet. Apparently that it was destroyed somehow. It was once the fifth planet from the sun, And they said it was destroyed by a nuclear war, which is interesting because we know that we are constantly having to deal with the concern of that issue somewhere around the world. The Mysterians were able to escape to Mars before the planet was rendered uninhabitable. Strontium-90 left the aliens' population deformed and crippled, and they thus desired to interbreed with women on Earth to produce healthier offspring and keep their race alive. So I know that the alarm goes off for many people, and like, those are the Greys. We know because we've heard this storyline over and over again that the Greys are doing this, that they have these MyLabs, and they are in these breeding programs, which are true. People have recall of it. People remember being there. People remember meeting their children, relating to these types of unions that were not permitted, verbally agreed to, but it's happening in an astral space of some sort, and then people are finding out that they're connected to it. In this case, it didn't look like they were doing it without permission. They were asking permission. And then, well, I take that back. They sort of took some of the women, and then they had to give the women back. And of course, there was one, who would be considered a hero that shows up at some point to rescue everyone. But the Mysterians said, we really don't want a war. We just want to, join back with you because we are humanoid. We, originated from probably this area as well, or maybe an early humanoid civilization, because there are others that existed before us. So, I don't want to be a spoiler and tell everyone what happens, but I will say that there's a lot of connections, and it also reminded me a bit of the Godzilla scenario, because if you look at the robot here, it could be like a metallic reptilian of some sort, or maybe it's a bird being, because then you also see that their helmets look like birds as well. So that there's, these, like I said, are the earlier stories of people, have this either download or recall, and then they turn it into a book of some sort, and then it becomes a movie, but it has to originate with some kind of memory, because they didn't have a lot of this information before, other than they did have unidentified flying objects. They did have encounters where we see in archaeology, there was images, there's different statues, there's all sorts of evidence that we have been visited before. That's why when I look at, some of these government meetings and discussing this, it feels like, we're all being gaslighted, and people are saying, well, is there something wrong with you that you believe this? Are we negating the fact that throughout our history, there's evidence of this, even in artwork, when people shouldn't have had anything like that, showing flying saucers and so forth? So, that for me is, they're essentially gaslighting everyone and saying they refuse to acknowledge that this occurred. But this movie in particular, I guess, was the beginning of some of the Godzilla movies, and this, huge creature moving around and attacking the people and creating this fear, which also then launches a major war, which is also what they're saying right now, that the people are informing the government that we are getting close to having an encounter with an alien race, and even more so, maybe a battle of some sort, this is exactly what happened. There was a battle, and it turned out not so well for the Mysterians. Of course, we know how stories would typically end in the older movies. They would never have it end that you lose. They would only have it end in a way that you win. In this case, nobody really won, because I think the Mysterians had technology, they had information, They were trying to avoid war. They didn't want war. They just wanted to cohabitate, and probably should have had a little bit more tactfulness in how that they went about, joining the population. They were demanding land, and they were demanding, or not demanding, but requesting to have female companionship. So some might say, well, just get rid of them. We don't want to deal with that. But I don't think they were altogether bad. And I'll tell you why. I recently did have a communication with them, and I do trust that their intentions are well, and I believe that some people are incarnated from that group that have an interest in what we're doing right now. But as I said, let's get back to, I'm going to share some things. The legacy of monsters. So because the government doesn't want to acknowledge this, corporations, hidden corporations, are taking advantage of this. And of course, there are the deeper or higher levels of security clearance that are fully aware of all this, but they don't want the general population to have knowledge about it. And if they would share the accurate information, we would and identify those that are safe for us to interact with, and not those that are not safe for us to interact with, then people could work together in that fact. But meanwhile, because of ignoring the subject, these MILABs are continuing. Their helmets and uniforms almost look like a bird, doesn't it? And they have a cape. And it's funny because the Hopi prophecy talks about the men with the red hat and the red cape. And I know a lot of people are saying, oh, well, that is Trump, because Trump always wore the red hat. But he doesn't necessarily wear a red cape, does he? And some might disagree and say this is more orange than red, but who knows with the color, because here it clearly looks red. But in the movie, it may look a little bit more orange. But as I said, these are old movies, and whatever their intentions were in the stylization and in the colors, that's something that might not be very transparent. Here they did mix the Transformers with the Mysterians. Thought that was interesting. So you see that this was like the basis of some of these other storylines that came in much later. So here's another area that I wanted to point out. At the end of the movie, they do have some, like a hero that goes in and takes out, the so-called bad guys, the aliens, because, they always try to say that the aliens are really bad. Maybe not necessarily. In some cases, yes. But in this case, I guess it could appear that way because they send this robotic transformer type of creature, a very large creature, coming in and started affecting the weather and everything and bombing things. So, just to get their attention, but they didn't want to actually go into war. But it becomes hostile towards the end. And this individual right here comes through and then starts killing them. He killed quite a few of them. I don't know if they were completely terminated, but that's kind of the end of it. And then, of course, we know how these things turn out. They end up getting experimented on and so forth. But getting back to this, I want you to notice the hat. And this triggered my thoughts regarding the Umbrella Academy and Reginald, who wore a hat. And remember, Reginald was also associated with, in the Umbrella Academy, with the shooting of JFK. And that he actually was there, or that he would take matters into his own hands. And so, and you see that he is somewhat alien, robotic, something to that effect. And so that's the reason why I thought that I'd bring that up. Another connection is the Power Rangers, which came out quite a bit later. I think it was in 1993. that the Power Rangers came out, obviously copying a certain look, the capes, the helmet. They actually remind me of motorcycle helmets, to be honest with you. But you know, the stylization of this look brings us back to the Mysterians. Of course, they don't have this beak feature that you see here in all of these pictures. Here is the robot that I was talking about earlier. And here is them carrying human females. You see satellites, you see technology, and you see those familiar space. They show these UFOs that look very similar to what people are sharing now on TikTok and some of the other social medias. There's another thing too, that this movie inspired pop culture, and there was a band that called themselves Mysterians. And this is interesting. They came up with a very, very popular song called that hit the charts around 1966 called 96 Tears. And let's take a look at it. The individual that wrote the song, he called himself Question Mark. So it was Question Mark and the Mysterians, or Question Mark and the Mysterians. And they were a Mexican-American garage rock band from Bay City in Saginaw in Michigan. They were initially active around 1962 to 1969, but I believe that they've played since then. It was inspired by the 1957 Japanese science fiction film, The Mysterians. In addition, the band's sound was marked by the raw, resonating lead vocals of Question Mark, his stage name of Rudy Martinez, making Question Mark and the Mysterians one of the earliest groups who had musical style is described as punk rock. So the first ones that came out with punk rock. Also, Question Mark was also referred to as Q, which I thought was very interesting, seeing that whole Q movement that came about. And who's to say that Q wasn't possibly inspired by the Mysterians? You know, in order to have that kind of following in this widespread activity, maybe in part they were the initial inspiration for that. Obviously, they called him Q, short for question, but I just thought that was a very, very interesting coincidence. I encourage you to watch the movie. I'm not going to apologize that it's old, that the effects look fake, that the storyline looks like it's been used before. I want to remind people that the storyline probably was the original storyline of many other sci-fi movies, or had inspired many other sci-fi movies. And it's good to have an understanding of where some of these things came about, rather than just saying, oh, I like this, but you know, they did it better here or whatever. When you start digging into the source, then you get a little closer to the disclosure of where the origin came from and who these individuals are that are bringing forward this information. And bringing it forward for a reason is to bring in an understanding of compatibility or potential compatibility with alien races or other humanoid races that are already present here, that we some of us are aware of and some are not willing to accept or acknowledge, but I think we'll get there at some point. So with that said, I think I'm going to wrap it up, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Have a good day, and share. Don't forget to share your comments below, and don't forget to subscribe.
You have been listening to Andronetalks Radio. Join us on YouTube channel Jessica Arael Morocco, and visit our website at www.readingsbyarael.com.